Now, I was talking before we sat down, and people were talking about, why is our politics so failing at the moment? Why is it not working for people? And if you start to look at it, and even if you start to dissect what Miliband said today, it's really not terribly far from Tory party policies. And particularly it's not very far from Tory party policies on one critical issue. How did we get to where we are today economically, and how did we get out of it? And the fact is, and I have to keep saying this, and again, most people understand it's right, but the Labour Party isn't saying it, the Tories certainly aren't saying it, the Lib Dems aren't saying it. Our economic mess, our debt problem, does not come from too much public spending. It comes from us bailing out the banks. It is the privatisation, it's the private debt being taken and socialised that we're now all paying for that's created a problem. And so the problem isn't government spending. The problem is that we had a financial system that absolutely ran wild. And one of the factors, that it's difficult to contemplate, we don't like to contemplate it, but we do need to think about it, is we have fundamentally done nothing to reform our banking system. There is no real change, and 2007 and 8 could happen again. In fact, it almost certainly will happen again, unless we fundamentally reform our banking system. And that's something that none of our main political parties are talking about. And we also have a whole economic system. And I think we can reduce this, you start to talk economics and it's all very, very abstract. You think about a £5 t-shirt that I'll guarantee you can walk out there onto the high street and find yourself a £5 t-shirt. And if you think about where that t-shirt probably came from, it was probably picked, the cotton was picked possibly in Azerbaijan by a 10-year-old who should have been in school, but they shoveled all of the children out into the fields to pick the cotton. It was then shipped using fossil fuel across the world to China, where it was spun into cloth in a sweatshop factory conditions that's pumping all its waste, the dyes, etc., out into the rivers. May well then that fabric shipped down to India, or possibly Bangladesh, and we've all now know about what factory conditions are like in garment factories in Bangladesh. And then some more fossil fuel shipped back to Britain and sitting there on the high street for £5. And that's not really a £5 t-shirt. That's a t-shirt that has a far higher cost, and a cost that we're not reflecting at the moment. And we have that whole globalised model of business that's absolutely very clearly hit the buffers. It's hit the buffers economically because we have here in Britain, since we've stopped making things, a low-wage economy based on services and retail. We have 0 hours contracts. We have people trying to live in central London on the minimum wage, £6.19 an hour. We have a whole economy that doesn't work economically. And all of that was based on low-priced fossil fuel, which we can't keep pumping into the atmosphere. So we have a whole economic model that's hit the buffers economically and hit the buffers environmentally. And yet the three largest parties are basically running the line that we've just got to adjust a few levers and change a few things. Make this interest rate higher and that lower, and ask employers nicely to pay a bit more money to their staff. And that's not going to get us out of the mess we're in. We need big radical change in the way our society works. It's a whole political space that only we occupy. And sometimes I know there's lots of Green Party people in this room, it feels a bit lonely, and it feels like a real struggle when you see UKIP looming there on the horizon. It's all pretty depressing, really. And it has been not entirely seriously suggested to me that what we really didn't do at Green Party conference was beat a couple of journalists around the head. We could have got a lot more attention if we'd beaten some journalists around the head. I'm not volunteering. But, I think we need to keep the UKIP factor in perspective. And I haven't actually got the final figures on this, I've got to get someone to check them, but I think I've got the general trend is clear enough. Immediately after the county elections, lots of journalists were throwing at me. There were now 176 UKIP Principal Authority Councillors and only 141 Greens. But I saw a figure a couple of days ago, and I happen to know that that Green figure has gone up to 123. We've elected a couple of new ones recently. And the UKIP figure is down to 147. And I think there's at least one person here from Lincolnshire who can tell you the story of where some of them have gone. And there's various scandals up and down the country. But if you look at the graphs, UKIP started up there and we're up there, but they're going one way and we're going the other. And I'm going to keep an eye on that, and we better make sure we tell the world when we pass, because they go down and we go up. But we do, particularly when we're thinking about the European elections next year, have to keep this in perspective. And it's really important we don't allow ourselves to be skewed by this. Because there will be, and this is a pressing thought, there will be some people who will go into the ballot box next May, and their pen will be hovering between UKIP and Green. But there's not very many. And they're not the voters we should be chasing. Because if we chase them, we're diverting our whole agenda, our whole political agenda. We want to turn out the small g Green voters. That means the people who are worried about their low wages, worried about their kids being unable to get a job, worried about a shortage of housing, worried about fuel poverty, worried about food poverty. All of those people, we have to say we have a model of how we can change British society for them. And I do have some good news while we're on the subject of figures, because there was a YouGov poll out on the European election a couple of weeks ago, and in that YouGov poll we were on 12%. That's the vote for the European election. And I can't resist sliding in here the fact that the Lib Dems were on 10%. But more importantly, what that 12% would do would give us a trebling of our number of MEPs that would be sending to Brussels. Now, we're a long way out from the election, we've got a long way to go, but it's a positive place to start from. And if we think about where we're starting from too, we're thinking about 2015 and the general election. We are a Green Party in a place that we've never been before. We're a parliamentary party. We made huge sacrifices collectively in 2010 to focus basically on one electorate, Brighton Pavilion. And that gamble paid off, and we have an absolutely brilliant MP in Parliament, Caroline Lucas, who wins lots of awards from the left wing, media and charities and NGOs, and even some awards from the right wing for being a remarkably effective MP. And we are in a different position to we were in 2010. In 2010 I stood in Holborn and St Pancras, which is central London, Frank Dobson seat, and we did 10 hustings. It's a very political place, Camden. And 10 hustings meant I got to know my 3 fellow candidates very, very well. Particularly the Tory, I got to know a lot better than I would have liked to got to know him. I can tell you his life story. He told his life story at least 3 times every husting, so I can practically still do it word for word. But I did 10 hustings. I got invited to all of them. It was a lot of fun. Lots of people came up to me afterwards and said, "You were really good and your answers were really good, and isn't that great?" And all of the other candidates, even though they actually had no chance of it, except for Frank of winning, were saying, "Elect me as your MP and I will do this, this and this." And in 2010, I couldn't say, "Elect me as your MP and I'll do this, this and this," because everyone would have just laughed. But in 2015, it's a different story. If Brighton Pavilion did it, anywhere in the country can, if they choose to, do it too. And it's very clear, and one of the things that the rise of UKIP does show us is that what I think I've taken to calling 2.5 party politics is utterly failed in Britain. And what people have been doing for a long time is voting for the person they dislike the second most. So the person they dislike the most won't get in. And that's given us the political system, the political class in Westminster that we have now. And we're in a situation now where we need to bust that open, to change to a new kind of politics, for people voting what they actually believe in. Just think about it for a second. If 70% of people who believe in bringing the railways back into public ownership, 70% of people who believe the minimum wage should be a living wage, I suspect 90% of people who believe the NHS should be publicly owned and publicly run. If even a decent percentage of each one of those votes Green, we're in a very different place. It's all out there for us to play for us to fight for us to campaign for, and for all of us to vote for. And it's there to play for. Let's go and do it.